Hey guys, it's Tom from Verus Engineering, and today we're going to be going over the install for your front splitter on the 991.1 GT3RS. Alright, tools needed to install this splitter kit. You're going to need a drill, as well as 2 drill bits, a 3/16 and a 5/32, a pair of scissors, some painter's tape, T25 Torx, T30 Torx, 13mm universal or a 13mm socket plus a universal socket, 7mm wrench, 4mm Allen key or socket, ratchet, a scribe or pick, straight pick, about 12-inch, 11-inch extension, 2mm Allen key, 2.5mm Allen key, and a center punch. Okay, so here is the layout of what you will receive in the package. I've got my trusty snap-on breaker bar I'm going to be using as a pointer. So first thing, you'll be supplied with 2 block-offs for the front diffuser if you choose not to run front diffusers. You'll receive 2 carbon front diffusers as I have here, kind of laying on top of the splitter. You'll obviously have a splitter as well. You'll receive a hardware bag, some carbon thermoplastic vanes for underneath the splitter. And what you're seeing basically around here are all of the brackets that you'll receive in order to mount the splitter to the car. Basically, if you want to pause here, if you ever need reference, I'll get out of the way. All right, so here we have a decent look at what our working area is going to look like. The first step that we're going to do is remove these lower wheel well pieces that fit right up here into the lower wheel well. We got 1 on each side. You're going to need a T30 and a T25. Go ahead and take those off now, and we'll be back. Next, again with a T30 socket, we're going to remove this center panel in the middle here. Take that off. You might encounter some double-sided tape. Just peel that off and get the panel down. Okay, so now we need to remove the front bumper off of the car, and it's a pretty simple process. Thankfully, Porsche, in my opinion, makes this very easy for us. What we need to do for this dot 1 is first get the marker lights out, which I think most Porsche enthusiasts are very familiar with at this point. There will be 3 T25 Torx head bolts that are holding the liner to the bumper. We will have removed some of the ones on the bottom already because of the under panel that we removed earlier. We'll go ahead and remove those Torx bolts. You'll be able to peel the liner back just a little bit, and then you will need to release this metal tang right here by pushing on it like that from the back side, going from the wheel towards the front of the car. This pops out, disconnect it. Now we're going to be able to see a harness that goes towards the middle of the car. Disconnect that harness. That's going to be for both sides. Okay, it's about 2 inches wide. On the driver's side only, there will be a washer for your headlight washers, a washer hose that will need to be released as well. It's a quick connect style hose, so you just pinch it and pull it, and that will come off. There are 3 T25 Torx head bolts along the top of the bumper skin as well in the center of the car. You will need to remove this cladding that is in the frunk area in order to access that, and that's as simple as basically pulling up and releasing the clips that kind of hold it in. So that's basically all you need to do to remove the bumper. Once you have all of those things done, go ahead and just get a partner and slide the bumper off, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so next step after removing the bumper cover is gonna be removing your radiator shrouds. Here it is here. Okay, basically in order to remove them, there are clips all around the outside perimeter of the condenser shroud, I guess, if you will. You're gonna pry them up with a screwdriver. I used a long flathead like this, and as you release them, keep a little bit of tension on them so they stay released, and then pop the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And then as you get enough of them off, this will come off. So radiator duct is now removed. And the next thing we'll be able to do after that is get a 13mm swivel, or a swivel with a 13mm on the end, and probably 11-inch, 10-inch extension, 12-inch extension. And really doesn't necessarily need to be that long, but basically you're taking off the crash bar with the 3 13mm head bolts, one on the top, 2 on the bottom. The other side is the same way. Go ahead and remove that as well right now, and then we'll be back with how to drill the crash bar out in order to get our clevises installed. All right, so we have our crash bar removed from the car, and we're gonna wanna drill this out so that we can install rivet nuts, and that way we'll be able to install our rod ends and clevises. So what you can see here, from this flange, you're gonna wanna measure 40mm that way. And from this edge on the crash bar, you're gonna measure 18mm down. And where those lines intersect, center punch and drill to 3/8 of an inch. And then we're gonna go ahead and install our rivet nuts. All right, so we have installed our rivet nuts on both sides. And we used our rivet nut installation tool, which is pretty simple to use. You're going to basically use a 5mm Allen, a 9/16 wrench, open-ended, and you're going to thread your rivet nut onto the bolt, insert the rivet nut into the hole, and you're gonna hold this hex portion back while you start to tighten the 5mm Allen until you start to feel significant resistance. And if you're wondering what it should look like, here's a picture of it now. All right, so now we have a place for our clevises to mount to. The next step is to get our clevises ready. What you want to do is take a 1/4-inch drill bit and drill the threads out like I have here, right through the middle. And that's going to allow us to use our 20mm low profile socket head cap screw, and we're going to slide it through the top like so, and this will allow us to install this into the crash bar. Now this is roughly the orientation that you want. You want it sort of pointed downwards and towards the front of the car, if you can see that there. All right, and that's going to give the rod ends, well, the rods themselves, enough of an angle to clear the ductwork and everything else that needs to be cleared for it to mount up to the bottom of the car. All right, guys, so we have since revised our brackets for the splitter. Basically what we're going to do is assemble them like this, and this is also what they will end up looking like when you get them. We're going to take 3 20mm buttonhead cap screws, and we're going to install the chassis bracket to the main splitter bracket, just like this. Okay, so once you have that on there, we're going to take the bolts, thread them in, and you want to torque these to about 6 foot-pounds. And so we want an 18mm washer, and make sure that the washer is on the bolt head side. And we are going to use the top 2 holes and the last hole. The top 2 holes will be in this orientation, and the last bolt be in this orientation. All right, here we've got the driver's side in view. This is probably the more difficult side, given the AC line that could potentially be in the way. If it is, this is the AC line. If it is in the way, just push it out of the way. It should only need to move like about 1/8 of an inch. Not a big deal. Basically, what we need to do next is get a ratchet and a swivel socket. That'll be a 13mm, and this is about an 11-inch extension. Oops, 11-inch. You're gonna need this for the top nut and the bottom one you can take off with just a regular wrench. Again, these are going to be 13 millimeter nuts. So go ahead and take them off. And then we're going to assemble or get this bracket onto the car. Now, you are gonna have to kind of massage this thing up in there. You will need to push this piece of the bumper upwards. That way we can avoid not having to trim anything so that this car can go back to stock at any moment. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the rear inner and the rear outer bracket. The rear outer bracket for the driver's side, they look the same for driver and passenger, but basically you want this ear facing towards the car with the nuts facing towards the rear, and then in terms of orientation, the longer side should be pointing inwards. And we also have the inner bracket here, which is going to be oriented with the slope side towards the rear of the car, and the nuts, the press nuts, towards the inside of the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and put them on now using the factory hardware that came out of those holes and tighten them up. And you wanna repeat the process for both sides. All right, we have our rear middle bracket installed and our rear outer bracket installed. I briefly put the splitter up in the air, make sure all of the holes line up. Essentially, you want the outer bracket to be as perpendicular to the center line of the car as possible, and you want the middle bracket to be as parallel with the center line of the car as possible. Next, we're going to install the support brace that will tie the two main brackets together. And so to do that, you're going to grab your support brace, the square tube. You'll see that there are 3 holes in the bracket on either side. You're going to pick the middle hole on both sides, and then you're going to grab your 12 millimeter washers, 40 millimeter button head cap screws, and M6 serrated flange nuts. And you're going to put the bolt in from the bottom up so that the button head is facing down. Once you have both the bolts started, torque them down to 6 foot-pounds. Okay, the crash bar is installed back on the car with the 13 millimeter bolts all tightened up to the factory torque spec. Next thing we're going to do is assemble our splitter rod or splitter ties. So we will take 1 long splitter tie and 3 extension pieces, and then we'll thread on the rod ends until they pretty much bottom out against the jam nuts at their shortest possible length. All right, so for the clevis or the splitter ties to mount into a lower clevis, we need to now install it. This is the clevis we'll be installing. It will or should be drilled out in the center in the same way as we did the uppers that are attached to the crash bar. There will be a pre-installed rivet nut here on the cross brace that ties the 2 splitter mounts together. Take your low profile 20 millimeter socket head cap screw and go ahead and start that in the hole. And struggle like I am until you finally get the correct tool. Like so. Now they are going to be pointed a little bit inward. If you just look at the orientation of where the upper clevis is, they should be pointed a little inward. So I would do that now. You don't need to tighten it just yet. What I would do is grab your splitter rod and feed it up into the crash bar and make sure it lines up with the upper clevis and the bottom clevis. Then remove it, and then we will torque these in their correct position to 6 foot-pounds. Go ahead and basically start to fish this in to where we installed the clevis on the crash bar, which you can't see right now. But I do have the splitter installed with the bumper off currently, just to show what is going on. And we're going to get everything lined up. Just like that. So it's routed behind the, I guess you would call it the upper radiator hose for the center radiator, or the only radiator hose for the center radiator. And it's very tight to the side bracket, mounting bracket of the center radiator as well. And it's going up and basically making contact in the clevis on the inside of the crash bar. All right, so let's get to assembling the actual splitter itself. We are going to mount or bolt up the front diffusers to the splitter using our M4 hardware, M4 button head cap screws, M4 fender washers, and M4 nylock nuts. We are also going to be installing 2 of these wear guides that will go up in the front here, and for that we'll be using 20mm button head cap screws. But first, we'll need to drill holes in the carbon fiber front diffusers in order to get them mounted up to the splitter. So to do that, we have a 3/16 drill bit ready to go. And I'm gonna use a small pick, just a straight pick. And basically you're going to set the diffuser in the indentation underneath. And while you have that held up in there, I like to use the pick or a scribe. Just mark your hole. Okay, so I've done 2. You can't really see them, but 1 here and 1 over here. And what I'm gonna do now is drill those 2 holes and off camera and basically bolt those 2 holes up, repeat the process for this side, and then once I have them both relatively in place with those 2 holes, I'll mark all the other holes and I can just drill them straight on the splitter and bolt everything up. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and we'll be back when we're ready to install. All right, so I've wrapped up installing the 2 front diffusers, again with our M4 hardware. 2.5mm Allen key or socket, and a 7mm wrench to grab the nuts. Now we're going to install our wear blocks. These need to go on the bottom, obviously, right? So I'm going to come around the front. These are actually also threaded, so what we're going to do here is find the holes, and I'm putting it the wrong way. We're gonna bolt them down from the top. All right, got them all started up, and we're gonna torque these to about 4 foot-pounds, or bottom them out and like in 1/8 of a turn. You don't want to strip the threads that are inside of the actual poly weave. Next, we'll need to drill the holes so that we can get the Airdam support brace installed in place. In order to do that, you're going to grab the template that is included, and this guy. You're going to cut out the pieces of the template as they are described in the instructions on the template itself. And once we have them cut out, we're going to tape them up against the Airdam, and we're going to begin drilling out the holes for that bracket. All right, so I've got the templates cut out and they're taped up to the factory Airdam, as you can see here. I went ahead and center punched all of the holes, and now I'm going to drill them out using our 5/32 drill bit. All right, with our holes drilled into the Airdam, we're gonna go ahead and grab the side Airdam brackets, and we're gonna thread our M4 studs that are supplied in the hardware kit, these little guys, into every other hole, just like I have here. Okay, once you have them installed, all the studs. Let's go ahead and install them on the top side of the air dam. Make sure you have the correct side on the correct side. And the press nuts should be facing upwards. In other words, the studs should be down and the flat surface should be against the air dam. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. All right, so time for the center bracket. For the air dam, we're gonna put this above the bumper lip, this white portion here, with the press nuts or PEM nuts facing upwards again, so that the flat side is down against the bumper. And right away, you'll notice that the holes from the push clips from earlier will line up with or correspond with the holes that are in this bracket. So we have that piece up there now. The next piece we want is the lower bracket that will attach everything to the air dam, or I'm sorry, the splitter. And that is gonna be facing this way. So these legs should be pointed towards the front of the car. And I'll get you a close up in a second, but basically you'll see there are 3 corresponding slots for the press nuts above them. And what this is gonna do is basically sandwich the air dam onto the splitter. So because of the angle, I'm gonna go ahead and do this real quick off camera, and then I'll get you guys close up next. All right, here you can see the bumper is sandwiched between the center forward bracket and also the air dam bracket. We've got our M6 button heads all the way through. See the last one over there. Sorry for the lighting, but yeah, you can see the bracket and how it's oriented here. All right, remember these brackets from earlier that hold the air dam down? So we got the studs in every other hole. And basically, here's what it looks like. All right, so we have 2 holes that are just through holes. Eric's dying. We have 2 holes that are just through holes on the bracket itself. Those 2 holes are going to be bolted to the actual air dam using your M4 by 0.7 hardware with a M4 fender washer, and this is the wrong side, and M4 nylock nut. That's gonna hold this piece in place as you go to put the splitter on the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and then when we come back, we are going to do the splitter install. All right, we have our M4 bolts holding in the bracket that will cinch down the factory air dam to the splitter, all installed. We torqued those to about 4 foot-pounds. They don't need to be cranked on or anything like that. Basically, they're just there to keep this thing in place. And now we've got our studs showing, and our studs are gonna be there to help us locate the splitter as it goes up. That being said, I'm gonna attempt to do this on my own, but we do strongly recommend that you have a friend or a helper help you with this. It's a lot of bolts to line up. So I'm gonna try and go ahead and do this off camera, and then when I get back, I'll go over the torque and the types of bolts we'll need. Okay, so off camera, I managed to get this thing up there by myself and also change my shirt. So what we did here was install all of our inch and a half outer diameter fender washers with our M6 button head cap screws, and those are going to be the 20mm long button head cap screws. We're going to install those into all of the corresponding pockets that will receive the inch and a half fender washers. And as you put the splitter up onto the car, make sure the studs for the air dam bracket that are going to help pull the air dam and seal it against the splitter are coming through the splitter holes on this outer perimeter here. Okay, once you have them poking through, you're going to want to start from the rear and work your way to the center. And the reason for that is basically as you start cinching it down, it's going to pull down on that bracket and the air dam and be able to get the bolts started a lot easier. Essentially, the bracket towards the middle might be floating inside of the bumper, and so as you work it towards the middle, it becomes tighter and tighter and tighter. So torque these down to about 4 foot-pounds, and we're gonna torque all of our M6 hardware to 6 foot-pounds. And once you've done that, you've completed the install. As always, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, be sure to email us at sales@verus-engineering.com. And until next time, we'll see you later.